Welcome to When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan, a Birdview podcast. This is a show for leaders in fast-growing professional service organizations looking for the latest conversations around service delivery best practices. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan. I'm your host, John Litterick. In today's episode, I talked to Kai Fahrion. Kai is the co-chief executive officer at Zeno. Zeno is a purpose-driven and community-minded home solar solutions provider that delivers best-in-class products and exceptional customer service to Canadian homeowners who want to create a sustainable future. Kai is a third-generation solar advocate with 7 years direct experience in the solar industry. Fun fact, Kai is committed to running 50 marathons with the other co-CEO, Gersh Ball, to raise money for their Strides for Sustainability initiative, which focuses on accelerating local and global sustainable impact. On today's show, we discuss proactive process improvement over band-aided reactive micromanagement. We then talk about the importance of key performance indicators to measure the effectiveness of process improvements. And of course, lots of insight from Kai on his vast experiences with spreadsheets. If you like what you hear, please follow the show and leave a rating wherever you're listening. Let's jump into it. Well, Kai, you've got a lot of experience. So yeah, like as the theme of our show, what's the biggest mistake you see organizations making, and what should they stop doing right away?
Yeah, it's a really good question, John. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is processes. So not actually creating processes for their businesses. So being able to bring things into play that are just, if an issue happens and they kind of just create a Band-Aid. And that's a big mistake, because then that Band-Aid is only good for so long. So again, you shower with that Band-Aid, you do stuff and it falls off and you have that problem again. So we look at that as create processes, and that's something that people should really get away from, is just Band-Aiding something because it's more convenient. Take that extra time to create the process around it.
Kai, I love it. I'm 54, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've seen that problem time and time again. I've been guilty of it in my own personal life. I love it. So, okay. But let's talk about where you've seen this mistake, and tell us when it really had a negative impact on the organization in terms of tangible things like revenue and resources, and even intangible things like, brand or reputation.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I would say this is more kind of in the early days. So we've been around for just over 7 years. A big part of this was kind of in that first 5 years or so, it would be almost on everything. So if I'm just being open and honest as well, is we would do things, and an example would be like a spreadsheet. Actually, a really good example is a spreadsheet is a good process that you can utilize and really grow on. There's so many things that you can do with a spreadsheet, and so many things that you can integrate into your business with it. And we would pretty much take something like our receivables, and we would actually write down certain things on pieces of paper. So instead of it being like a tracking mechanism, it would be, hey, we have this many invoices due or this many things due, and we would write it down on pieces of paper. And that was a huge mistake, because that then impacts your revenue of your AR, so your accounts receivable. You're not collecting on the right times. You're maybe missing an invoice here or there. And then also on your accounts payable, because then you come down to vendors reaching out to you saying, hey, this is past the due dates. And maybe you're like, oh, I forgot to put that sticky that was on my screen kind of thing. So really big negative impact there. And being able to switch into spreadsheet tracking with that, and then also utilizing financial tools, again, like a QuickBooks or whatever it might be. The other thing that it would be is brand and reputation. Is people look at these things as, if you're a brand or a company that has issues, we'll go back to invoicing, where the job's done and they don't receive an invoice for a week, it really shows that you're not organized. A lot of the things now with us is it's on the spot. You can pay with a credit card machine. You can pay right away on the spot. And that was the big growth throughout that, is that people start to see the brand as almost you're kind of just a fly by night. You don't really know what you're doing. And it does hurt your reputation in the long run. Now, we didn't get to the point where it was, hey, people were having these reputation issues with us, but it was more so nipping that before it actually became a big problem and kind of being proactive. That's a big thing within our company is the proactive side of things. And I think it should be a big thing for a lot of people, is being proactive rather than reactive for situations like this.
Great example. we really like it on the program when someone can talk about, their own business experience and, do the before and after. So that was great. I mean, it's really clear, like, you want to have tight processes. That's the message of your story, right? Stop doing things, manually ad hoc, start having processes. Can you give a little bit more context about, like, maybe to the level that someone should do this to? Because you can like do too much process.
Yeah, really good segue as well. So with process, I think it comes down to evaluating the situation. So as I mentioned at the beginning, is a Band-Aid solution normally doesn't work. And then you look at, okay, well, what's the timing? When can we actually turn that into a process how much time is it going to take to build that process? So does the Band-Aid make sense for, let's say, a day? And then you look at, okay, well, let's look at that. We can build a process out of that. When you go into the process side of things, what we actually do is we create high-level processes, so like a departmental process, and then each individual manager will actually go in and create more detailed processes around that department. Now, I have heard of organizations getting as crazy as, like, I don't know, a paper cut process or whatever it might be, and that might not be crazy for some, but that is what it can get to when you really get to scale. So I think the biggest thing is, where is your company at, and what process is right for the time in your growth that you're at? So I don't think there's a blanketing statement that says, don't go this far down the process rabbit hole. If your company needs a really detailed process because you have 500 people and that's something that has to be there just because it's a part of that many people being an organization, then go for it. But don't make a process that's meant for 500 people when you only have 100. I think it's the evaluation, and especially your leadership team, to be able to evaluate that within their different groups.
Wow, that's awesome. I like how I'm a big process guy. I sell a software that drives process, right? Prior to my previous job, I used to help companies do their business architecture as process. But I like what you said about really taking into account scale, because you're right. What works for 100 employees isn't going to work for 50, isn't going to work for 500. You got to look at scale. That's often missed. So I think that's really, really like a key thing, to your message and point. So I like that. That resonated with me. Okay, this is a part of the show, Kai, where we challenge the guests to take their wisdom and boil it down into like a one sentence maxim. No pressure if you can. I always say that to our guests. But basically, what would you stop doing and start doing if you could boil it down into one sentence?
Okay, that's a really good question. So ideally, I would stop micromanaging and I would start delegating and elevating.
Oh, I like that. Stop micromanaging and start elevating. What was the last part?
Delegating and elevating.
Delegating and elevating. Very good. Yeah. Stop micromanaging and start delegating and elevating. I like it. Well done. And you got it in one sentence. Kudos.
Yeah, it's never easy with that.
Yeah, so we have to see if we can remember that at the end of this conversation. Good. So here's the part of the show where we want to get into, like, why do people do this wrong behavior? I mean, we all know this is a wrong behavior, Band-Aids, but why do we all do it, right? Why do you think that? What's driving this bad behavior of living too long with a Band-Aid?
Yeah, really good question. I think it's the time. So I would say time. I would say being reactive rather than being proactive. So I think the biggest part about that is that when individuals feel like they don't have time to make a solution that, again, if a Band-Aid takes 30 seconds and a solution takes 10 minutes, that's a huge fold of more time that you need in a day. But I think that they don't understand that those minutes that you're saving or that you're saving there, you're going to end up actually burning those tenfold in the next whatever times these problems come up. So I think the biggest thing is that people just don't look at the long-term impacts of an issue and what they can actually do to an organization. And then further that is what it can actually do to the growth of the organization. You actually see a lot of times that companies will grow too quickly and they'll actually hinder themselves with these mistakes because they Band-Aid things. And then all of a sudden they get to a point where you have a ball full of Band-Aids and they all start to fall apart, and it actually can step you back 2 steps when you only took 1 step forward. So I think it's really time and ability to see the bigger picture or the longer term outlook of the organization, what they're trying to do with what that problem has created.
Oh, very good. Very good. I'm going to change up. I'm not going to ask some of the normal questions I'd ask this time because I want to spend a little extra time. Describe a situation. I want to have you describe a situation where you notice someone micromanaging and you changed it to a delegation elevation approach. And I think people would really want to hear how you would do that. I think an example is the best way.
Yeah, no, definitely open to sharing an example. So an example of that would be the structure kind of that we've built within the company. So currently we have a management team, and a big part of that is that we've actually shifted to KPIs and weekly meetings within the whole management team to go through those KPIs. And to give an example and to tie it back is that before we put in this structure, it was very reactive of you see an invoice or you see an accounts payable that's really high, and right away you're reaching out to your finance side, like, what was this? Where is this? And why are we paying this? Or what happened here? We're a day overdue. Very, very reactive. If you look at the delegate and elevate side, they know you pretty much delegate to them, hey, this is your role. These are the expectations of you, and these are the KPIs that you're hitting each week. And if there's an issue with the KPI, coming to that meeting on the weekly basis of why was that KPI not hit and what's the solution, or is there something that's out of your control? So delegating that really makes it that on a weekly basis, I don't have to go ask about these things. If I see something like that, if I see, again, an overdue accounts payable or anything, I don't even worry about it. I look at it as, hey, I'm going to have an answer for it, and they're going to bring it to my attention, because you've given them that, you've empowered them to make those decisions, rather than you having to always be there and say, they know, oh, Kai or whoever it might be is going to come and ask me about this, and they kind of feel like they're not empowered to be in control of that situation. So that'd be the example I would give.
Wow, that's really great. So sticking on that example, now that you don't have to micromanage that finance situation,
yeah.
You've empowered your finance group to bring it to your attention at the meetings. What would you say is the biggest benefit? You've gained back more time, or is it more like peace of mind, or is it better decision making? What was the biggest benefit of moving away from the reactive mode to the the proactive mode with the KPIs?
Yeah, really good question. I think it's all the above. You gain back time in a sense of you can work on the things that drive growth within the company. So one of my roles is being able to execute growth plans and expansion. So you can actually work on those things. You can trust the individuals that if there's something that comes up, you know that they're going to be communicating with you. So you've gained time, trust. You've gained almost peace of mind in your sanity to run the company, because you know that there's individuals they're in these places that know what they have to do and what they're having to hit. So I would say it's all the above. I think you're kind of gaining a little bit of everything. And at the end of the day, you almost gain more control of the business, where it might seem like you're not as much in control. It's really once you start letting go of a lot of these things, you realize there's probably someone that is just that little bit better than you at it, and they'll probably figure out a process, which ties back to the beginning, that is even better than the one that you might have thought of. And they're the ones that are going to just, again, give you that peace of mind that the company's running smoothly. And when it's not, you know exactly where to dig into and which departments and which areas, because you're having those KPIs.
Oh, that's excellent. I really like that too, that, you recognize that, if someone is doing the job 40 hours a week, day in and day out, they're so close to it, they're probably going to have the better idea of what the process should look like, right?
Yeah.
Than, someone's necessarily maybe abstracted a few levels above and looking at the bigger picture. So that's good. We found that at my last place of employment, when we were doing anything around business architecture, it was very important to, get right down to the actual specific workflow process and really talk to the people doing it to really understand, how, get their perspective on how it could be improved. So I think that's really very sound advice. Okay, you've already actually talked a lot about kind of the how, so I'm going to change up our questions slightly. how would one go about picking the right Band-Aid to work on first? Like when you decide, as a leader, I'm going to stop micromanaging in this area, I'm going to start delegating and elevating. How do you pick what you're going to work on and you're going to create a KPI?
Yeah, really good question as well. So we actually have kind of a system in play that covers that. So we take things, and if there's issues that, again, some issues you have to have a conversation right away and you have to interact with your team and try to solve it or come up with a solution on the spot. But if it's something that, let's say a manager comes up and says, this could be an issue, I need to talk within that management team meeting, they'll put it as an issue within that meeting. And then what happens is when everyone's sitting around that table having the discussions, there's a time to go through issues and kind of weekly things that have come up. And when you're going through those issues, you rank them. So you actually go through and you rank as a team, which ones are really important, or like, do you want to bring one, rank that number one, we'll go into it. And a lot of times what happens with that is that you as a team decide what the actual important issues are, and you realize that maybe your issue is actually not that important, or it's not a thing that has to be solved right away because marketing has a way bigger issue that everyone needs to kind of get in front of. And then also the nice thing with that is we do quarterly, full quarterly sessions, and then yearly as well. And sometimes we even say, let's move that to the quarterly. That's something that is a bigger picture issue that we need to actually set a bigger task around, where it might take a few weeks or a few months to actually roll out. Let's put that onto our quarterly. We'll address it then, and then we'll actually have a plan of how we're going to go through that and how we're going to attack it. So it's a system through EOS. It's called Traction EOS, and it's a really big kind of like implementer of how we roll out all of our stuff.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. I mean, I really like this conversation. It's a very important topic, and you've given some real structure to it, right? And I know our listening audience is going to, greatly appreciate that. So I'm going to kind of go to one of the final questions that we like to ask. Okay. Say somebody's listening and they're like, Kai's really laid this out really well. He's given me some good ideas on how to approach the KPIs and, how to look for the Band-Aids and how to fix them. So if someone wants to do this, what could still go wrong, right? We know the best plans can still go awry, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Let me ask you, this is such an interesting conversation. Let me ask you the question slightly different than I normally ask guests. Okay. Yeah. When have you tried to, fix a Band-Aid using your approach, but it didn't work out the way you intended? Have you always had 100% home runs, or was there ever a time it didn't go the way you expected?
Yeah, I think, definitely there's been situations where it hasn't worked out 100% of the way. And what the actual cool thing about that is, to bring an example into it, is it actually ends up being that it's not me that's mostly catching that. It's that the individual, again, in that department or whatever it might be, is normally catching that and saying, hey, this was the plan, or this was the solution for this, but now actually going through the process of building this, here's slight tweaks and here's little things. And it goes back to them being in charge and having that confidence within their decisions. And another big thing within that is they're allowed to fail. So everybody makes mistakes. Everyone's allowed to fail when it comes to situations. It's about them recognizing a failure or owning up to that something just didn't work out how it was laid out. And again, everything laid out on a whiteboard is always nice, but then when it gets into the real world, it doesn't always work. So I would say, 100%. There is areas where it hasn't always worked on how we wanted, but then it's being able to adjust that as well and saying, okay, well, for our example, our business, there's seasonalities. So how does seasonality play into your KPIs? How does that actually impact that as well? So yeah, overall, I would say there is situations where it doesn't work, but it just creates a conversation. And those conversations are usually minor things. If it's a mistake, it's a minor thing, and it's just figuring out, again, how are we fixing that as a team, or what's already the solution? They're coming to you with the solution on top of that.
Oh, that's great. And a lot of people, they talk about how they empower their employees and elevate their employees, but if you're not letting them fail, it's what's the word I'm trying to say? it's meaningless, right? It's rhetoric. But if you can really let them fail so that they can learn, that is true elevation. So I like what you said there as well. And I think that's so key. If you get an employee excited to improve their own job, to ask questions about how can I make this process better? And how can I continually make it better? I mean, if everyone in your company is rowing that way and doing the right things, your company's going to move fast. So that's great. I think that's really, really cool. Kai, hope you'll be a guest again. I found this like a really great conversation. I know that the listening audience will really, really like that. I think your maxim's really cool. Like stop micromanaging, start delegating and elevating. I love it. I'm going to use that in my own vernacular when I speak to my colleagues and employees and peers. We're trying to do something a little different. You're the second guest here. We're trying to give one final question out tied to the title, When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan. It doesn't have to be necessarily related to what we've been talking about today. It'd be great if it could, but tell us your good or bad or ugly spreadsheet story.
Yeah, those are always fun. So first of all, spreadsheets can be simple or super complex. So I would say one of the big things for this is, or a story that I have, is the evolution of one of our internal spreadsheets. So one of our things is pricing projects. When we first built pricing projects, again, it was on a piece of paper. You're writing it out, and then it kind of elevated into a computer program, a little bit of Word, and then that actually expanded into spreadsheets, and being able to make it almost automation, bringing automation into the spreadsheets. And we had the example where that pricing calculator has now evolved to a very complex spreadsheet that you can input data points and it will spit out stuff for you. So I would say it's a positive of allowing programs like, again, if it's a spreadsheet or an automation within your CRM or your project management software, allowing those automations to help you. And don't look at an automation or something being simplified as a bad thing. It ends up being that it makes the individual that's kind of the owner of that project, it makes it easier for them, and it creates more fail-safes, that there's less areas for errors. So for us, it was developing this more in-depth calculator allowed us to have less errors, and then it also allowed us to have it allowed us to increase revenues because you don't have errors as much, and that's your bottom line, right? So you're increasing the revenues, and it creates, I think you're saving the sanity of the individuals that are in charge of that part of the process, because they're not stressed as much about there could be an error here. There's all these different fail points and all these different automations that are built into it.
Oh, that's a great story. Oh, that's good. Well, good. Well, that's great, Kai. And, let's talk real soon. Thank you for being on When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
Projects, resources, finances, a single source of truth for service delivery teams. Birdview PSA helps increase profitability by automating and optimizing the entire service delivery cycle. You've been listening to When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan, a Birdview podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show. That helps us to keep delivering the latest and best practices for professional service teams. Until next time.